We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a blessing and gift from God. Jacob was the son of Isaac and Rebekah. He had a twin brother, Esau, who was the firstborn, but Jacob grabbed him by the heel during their birth. The name Jacob means to grab another's heel. Literally speaking, it means to take what belongs to someone else. When Jacob and Esau were grown, Jacob tricked his brother out of his birthright with a meal. Later, Rebekah conspired with Jacob to trick Isaac and steal Esau's blessing. This resulted in Esau wanting to kill his younger brother, so Jacob fled. On his journey to his mother's homeland, he had a vision of angels and a ladder to heaven. When Jacob reached Haran, he meets his match in his uncle Laban. Though Jacob is in love with Laban's younger daughter Rachel, he is tricked into marrying her older sister, Leah. Jacob persists, however, and is finally able to marry the object of his affections. Jacob worked many years for Laban. Because of God's protection and Jacob's intelligence, Jacob was able to take much of Laban's herd for himself. Finally, God directs Jacob to return to the land of his father. The problem with that is it means Jacob will have to face Esau. As he approaches home, Jacob sends messengers to Esau. They return to tell him that Esau is approaching them with 400 men. Things don't look good for Jacob. He strategically divides his people and possessions and sends them across the Jabbok River. He stays behind and prays. This is where our lesson begins. Our first verse says, "That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of the Jabbok." Jacob is afraid and distressed. He has sent out 5 herds of animals as gifts to his estranged twin brother, Esau, in hopes of appeasing his brother's decades-old anger against him. Whether it was his plan all along, or Jacob just couldn't stand the suspense, he rises in the night, gathers his family of 2 wives, 2 servant wives, and 11 children and crosses the ford of the nearby Jabbok River, which flows into the Jordan River from the east, which is a part of the borders of the Promised Land. Jacob waited for his family to cross the stream, and then returned to the original campsite alone. Verse 23 says, "After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions." Jacob sent everything he had left in the camp across the river. Everything was packed up and moved out. Jacob either did not cross the river himself, or crossed back over to the other side. In either case, he remained behind alone. Scripture does not give an explicit reason for this decision. Perhaps Jacob intended to pray alone. Perhaps he just wanted to be alone for a while. Verse 24 says, "So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak." Now comes an unexpected and startling statement, "A man wrestled with Jacob until dawn." No meaningful details are given as to how this contest began. We're not sure, from the text, if Jacob was violently attacked by an unknown man, or if there was some challenge, conversation, or warning before it began. They engage in real, physical combat or wrestling. Their contest seems to be more or less a stalemate, continuing to sunrise. Jacob, who has been dreading a fight with his brother Esau, suddenly finds himself in an actual fight, but with a stranger. Verse 25 says, "When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man." Although Jacob was apparently a man of considerable strength, the angel of the Lord limited his own strength to match Jacob's, so he could not defeat Jacob. It was not in his own strength that Jacob wrestled, nor by his own strength that he prevailed, but in and by strength derived from God. Seeing that Jacob was not giving up, God touched the socket of Jacob's hip, which was his point of balance and strength. The Lord put Jacob's thigh out of joint to show him that it was God he was wrestling with, for no mere man could disjoint his thigh with just a touch. Having previously depended upon his wits and strength, now Jacob's natural powers were crippled. Verse 26 says, "Then the man said, 'Let me go, for it is daybreak.' But Jacob replied, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.'" Jacob is now at a total disadvantage. Although clearly defeated, Jacob will not release the man. The man insists, wanting to leave since dawn has come and the angel completed what he had come to do. Jacob refuses. He recognizes this man has supernatural power. In fact, he seems to understand this is God or a representative of him. Jacob insists that the man bless him. Couldn't this mighty angel get out of Jacob's hold? Of course he could, but he didn't, in order to honor Jacob's faith and prayer, and further test his persistence and perseverance. Jacob persisted in this holy opportunity to receive a blessing. He may have thought that regardless of what becomes of his family and his journey, he was determined to make the best he could of this opportunity, and not lose the advantage of his wrestling match. Receiving credit for a victory would do him no good without the comfort of a blessing. Verse 27 says, "The man asked him, 'What is your name?' 'Jacob,' he answered. Seeing how persistent Jacob was, the angel asked him, 'What is thy name?' In the Bible, a person's name gave some insight into their character. This man who had struggled with the Lord answered the angel saying that his name was Jacob, which means heel catcher. It can also mean supplanter, which describes someone who wrongfully or illegally seizes and holds the place of someone else. This certainly described the character of Jacob. Jacob, by revealing his name, was giving insight into his character and nature. Jacob has demanded a blessing, something he once stole by lying about his identity. In this instant, Jacob can either continue to be a liar and a deceiver, or he can be honest about who he really is. Jacob the heel puller, the usurper. Jacob the liar admits the truth. Verse 28 says, "Then the man said, 'Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome.' As a result, God will give him a new name, and a new identity, as the father of God's chosen people. So the word Israel means prevails with God. This new name, Israel, was a good choice partly because of the outcome of the wrestling match with the angel. As someone who prevailed with God, the name Israel also recognized that Jacob would be successful and prevail in his reunion with his father Isaac, and his brother Esau. The symbolism of this event is critical to Christian understanding of sin and salvation. Despite Jacob's lies and schemes, and all of his struggling against God, he cannot be truly blessed until he recognizes his own disadvantage and admits who he really is. This not only involves identity, it is an act of submission. Ancient people believed that knowing and using a person's name gave the speaker power. In response, God grants Jacob a new name, symbolically making him into a new man with a renewed purpose. Verse 29 says, "Jacob said, 'Please tell me your name.' But he replied, 'Why do you ask my name?' Then he blessed him there." Now Jacob asks for the man's name, a request which is flatly refused. In that era, knowing a person's name was considered to be a major advantage. It was believed that speaking or invoking a person's name could produce spiritual effects, coercing them or providing leverage. Jacob has already, submissively, given his real name to this man. The stranger, however, does no such thing. This, again, underscores the idea of mankind's total submission and subjection before God. He owes us nothing, and we have no leverage or power over him, at all. A changed Jacob understood that an interest in the angel's blessing was better than simply knowing his name. We can say that Jacob reached his goal, he wrestled for a blessing, and a blessing he received. Verse 30 says, "So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." At this point Jacob realized the importance of everything that happened to him that night as well as where it happened. As a result, Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. He also said that the reason he chose this name was because I have seen God face to face. Jacob's statement "I have seen God face to face" refers to his awareness of divine revelation and confirm the identity of this mysterious person as the angel of the Lord, or God himself. God is a spirit, but he sometimes appeared in angelic or human form. Not only did Jacob see God face to face at Peniel, he also said, "And my life is preserved." Notice that Jacob didn't say, "In this place I wrestled with God, and prevailed," but he said, "In this place I saw God face to face, and my life was preserved." Unlike many of us would, Jacob didn't say that it was his praise that made him prevail with God. As a changed man he could say that it was because of God's grace and mercy that he escaped the wrestling match with his life. Verse 31 says, "The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip." Jacob's long night finally comes to an end. This injury does not seem to be minor. Dislocations can cause permanent damage. It's not unlikely that Jacob's overnight wrestling match permanently affected both his spirituality and his body. As the sun rises, Jacob limps past the place he has now renamed Peniel, reflecting this moment where he came face to face with God and was spared from death. After all of this, Jacob is now ready to rejoin his family and show his face to his twin brother Esau. His fear is likely now greatly diminished, having survived a far deadlier encounter and having received a new name and a blessing from God. Our final verse says, "Therefore to this day the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon." Jacob, now renamed Israel, is limping as he leaves Peniel. Most likely, this is a permanent condition, and Jacob will carry the physical evidence of his struggle with God for the rest of his life. In remembrance of this event, Jacob's descendants, the children of Israel, would not eat the muscle in any beast to which the hip bone was connected. The reason given for the Israelites not eating the tendon was because God touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh. This custom is still followed by many Jewish people. The law of Moses does not forbid this eating of the sinew of the thigh on the hip socket. However, it is many Jewish persons' way of recognizing this crucial moment in Israel's identity and acknowledging the God who fights for them. Jacob called Israel. Jacob was at a great crisis point in his life. He was about to meet Esau, his twin brother, after 20 years of estrangement. The thought of this meeting drove Jacob to earnestly seek God, Genesis 32:9-12. Later, God in a human form wrestled with Jacob, eventually crippling him. Jacob, recognizing his divine assailant, hung on for a blessing. The new name, Israel, that he was given, assured Jacob that God would fight for him. Crises come into the lives of all of us from time to time. Crises drive us to our knees in prayer, and it is in those situations that God meets us and strengthens us. When crises come, we should hang on to God, and like Jacob, seek his blessing. Jacob called Israel. 1. Every believer should persist in pursuing God's blessings, Genesis 32:22-26. Persistence allows us to cling to our faith through all the obstacles and discouragement we encounter. 2. Only those who have begun a personal relationship with the Lord are adequately prepared to serve Him. Genesis 32:27-29. Our relationship with God helps us feel supported throughout our service to the Lord and those around us. 3. Memorials help us remember the life-changing experiences we have had with the Lord. Genesis 32:30-32. Memorials allow generations to be inspired to remember Jesus' nature and His power to change lives. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.